Kia ora, no mai, hara mai, to Darkness to Light, Inspiring Conversations with Survivors of Childhood Abuse and Trauma. Welcome to Ihi, Intuitive Healing Intelligence. This is Sister B. Ko wai, ko wai. He uri tēnei nā Ngāti Kaungunu ki te Wairoa tū hoi, tamakai moana, e mihi atu ana, no mai, hara mai, welcome. Darkness to Light is a weekly conversation with survivors of childhood trauma and abuse, and it is really an honour to hold space, chat, have conversations with a whole lot of different people from all over Aotearoa and beyond. And tonight we do have a special guest who is breaking ground for us here at Darkness to Light. He is our first male who will be up sharing, Native Indigenous Tāne, who has offered to come and share his journey. So again, welcome with the intention to gain insight, understanding, self-reflection and healing through sharing of our conversations and narratives and journeys and stories. So no mai hara mai. Remember that our stories could be the key that unlocks someone else's prison. So, ko au tēnei, ko Sister B. Hei tūmatanga māku, I'm just going to do our little whakatauki. Tuia ki te rangi e tūnei. Tuia ki te whenua e takoto nei. Tuia ki te moana po kare nei. E rongo I te po, I te ao, I te po nei e. Nō reira, no mai, hara mai, and welcome, and kia ora to those who are tuning in. It gives me great pleasure right now to bring on tonight's guest. We have Michael Patrick O'Connor. No mai, hara mai, and welcome, Michael, to Darkness to Light and to Aotearoa, New Zealand. It is an honour to host you and have a conversation with you about our kaupapa tonight, and sending blessings to you over there in, well, actually, I'm going to just invite you to introduce yourself and where you're coming in from tonight.
Oh.
Welcome. Hello.
Au matakiapi mi chaze ki Michael ga I hankoano yake o mataha. Chante washte yuha na pe chiuzape. Sioux City, Iowa, USA, NYT. My name is Michael Patrick Wambadi Gadeska O'Connor. I'm Wambadi Gadeska translates to Spotted Eagle in Dakota. And so I'm coming from you from Sioux City, Iowa, right along my homelands of South Dakota. And I'm from the Yankton Sioux Nation. And I'm honored to be here. It's pretty early. It's 2:30 a.m. in the morning here in America right now, Central America. And so I am a little bit tired. So please bear with me, but I am very honored, and I appreciate being here this morning.
Thank you so much. And especially for getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to come and have a chat with us. You're a brave, courageous human being. Thank you. Especially for a live interview as well. So yeah, ngā mihi anō, thank you again. So we're it's from Darkness to Light. We share conversations, stories, journeys, personal journeys, life journeys with our followers and our listeners. And I just want to say again, thank you for being with us here tonight, and we look forward to sharing some of your journey with you. So I'm going to ask, probably just to get us started, and once we get in the flow, I do want to just have a bit of a chat and to talk about some that you have been through, endured, navigated in life. I've had the privilege to hear some of your story, so look forward to sharing that with others tonight. So our kaupapa tonight, our topic is survivors of childhood trauma and abuse. So I just want to ask you, Michael, when was the first experience that comes to mind that you can remember on, those times when in your childhood that happened? What happened? Tell us about your early memories.
Boy, there's a lot of them, Benita, and I just want to say welcome to everybody that's watching, everybody out there that's joining us tonight. And so let me just take just a quick second just to think back. I think probably the first memory that really stands out to me was my mother, even to this day, is a practicing drug addict. And so I say that with a broken heart. But my first memory was probably around 4 years old. And I was in another foster home due to my mom's heroin addiction. And the impact of her addiction at that time was being moved around from foster home to foster home and from institution to institution. And it was at that time, I remember, about 4 years old. I don't remember the exact age, but it was right around that time that I had been separated from my older brother and my younger sister during these difficult times and being moved around. And I had been separated from them, and it was very traumatic. I remember it was a very scary time because it didn't seem like my young mind and my young heart could really grasp and understand what was happening. And so I really didn't know how to ask any questions. I really didn't know how to speak for myself or my family, and I don't really remember a whole lot of communication between those that were responsible for me. And so I remember at 4 years old, I had been separated, already from my mother, but then I became separated from my brother and my sister. And I remember at that time being that young and looking out of a screen door window in a home that I still don't know who they were looking back on it now, but they took me in as a foster child. And I remember looking out into like this vast South Dakota prairie. And I remember at that time I felt numb. It seems as though at that time I began to shut myself off to my own emotions because it seemed like it was too much at that time, and I had so many questions, and I didn't know how to ask or express that. And so that it was at that time I think that my heart really became broken, and that I shut myself off to numb myself off to emotions and things such as that, because I can remember very well just staring almost blankly out of that screen window and just wondering what was happening, and not even really being able to even sort of grasp exactly what was happening on an emotional level.
I remember when we were talking about this, how the first time you shared that with me, that it was actually very deep, poignant moment in the whole journey. That, and when you were sharing that, I could feel that child just staring into somewhere, just in a blank, in a nothing, not understanding. And I remember the words you said to me. At that moment, my heart broke. And that was a very moving moment when you were sharing that with me. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And a 3.5, 4-year-old child does not have the emotional understanding capability to comprehend what is happening. And so one of the things you talk about, noticing that was the time when you started feeling numb. Yeah. And mum being a heroin addict. What about dad? Where was dad in the picture?
Oh, Dad, I didn't have any sort of mental picture at that time of my father. He had died when I was about 1 year old. He was a Vietnam veteran, and I even to this day I don't know very much about him. I just recently in the last 5 years received pictures. I came into contact with family on that side that I didn't know, and so I was able to see and find out what he looked like. But he did die when I was 1 year old after he came back from Vietnam. What I've been told is that he started to drink very heavily. And then it was on the Yankton, Oyate, the Yankton Sioux Nation, where we were living at that time, where they were out drinking and he was driving. And there's a intersection on the Yankton Sioux Reservation called 6 Mile corner, which at that juncture, there's basically 6 miles to that town, 6 miles to that town. That's why they called it. But that's where he died in a very fiery, gruesome type manner from what it's been described to me by people much older than me, but still remember going way back what had occurred on that day where my father was the driver and everybody was drinking and it took multiple lives as well. So I never did get to know my father, but certainly I wish that I would have. Again, that is something that I suppose probably a piece of me will probably yearn for until the day maybe when I cross over on my journey, and then maybe see what happens next.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So what was, like, you had a brother and sister. What was the experience like just before the separation, like with mum and her state? And what was that for you? Do you remember much about what that space was about?
I don't remember much. I was so young. Even at that time, being in foster care and it being such a scary experience, I didn't even remember what exactly my mother looked like, and so I only had a mental picture of the color of her hair, being that young. And so it was just the three of us, and it seemed like we were sort of thrown out into a very scary world where back then it didn't seem like very many people talked to us. They just kind of corralled us from one place to the next. And I know that they were doing the best that they can, but that's certainly how it felt. It was a very, very scary situation. And I think that it, in a lot of ways, has still, I'm 49 now. After all these years, it's not something that I wanted, but it's something that I feel along the healing path that I've today admit with honesty to myself that has still impacted me even to this day. And that I think that is, well, I guess right now I can't find the words for it, but it's certainly something that if there's somebody out there right now, after years and years later, that's listening, I relate to that very much so.
And what about your brother and sister now? Where are they? Do you know where they are?
Yeah. And when I speak about, particularly when I speak about my brother and sister, because of everything that we've gone through together, I get emotional very, very quickly, because I think because of the current situation has a lot to do with that. We live in the same apartment building right now. And so right now, if I was able to look out this window, and that's fresh sage that we just gathered today for prayers, I could look up and I can see where my older brother's apartment would be at. And my sister and my nieces and nephews also live in the same building. But certainly, again, I also say with sadly, I say also with a broken heart that My brother is an active alcoholic even to this day. I fear I have a lot of fear that that the phone is going to ring, and I know exactly why that phone is. It's almost like I'm waiting for that phone to ring because how heavy his drinking is. And my sister as well is a drug addict. Um, and so drugs and alcohol have just been heavily impacted in my family. I'm a recovering alcoholic drug addict. Um, and so um, emotions are very powerful. There is something that I wanted to not feel at one time, and even today, despite the fact that I'm over 25 years sober, there are certain things that hit me right here in my heart and my family. Even after all these years, I think thinking back to that time when I stared out that window, I think sometimes I still do have that feeling because of this destructive nature that drugs and alcohol have impacted on my own life, but also losing my father and having the experience of which I would feel are probably attachment issues even to this day, trust issues, honesty issues, and also an um, uh, ongoing emotions with directly with alcohol and drugs and the destruction that they have had upon my family. So
Mm. Yeah. So you talked about that fostering home and moving from place to place, and what were your teenage years like for you? What happened during those years?
oh, I always say, and I always say when people, when I visit with people and they say getting old is, is sucks. I don't like it. It's terrible. I would want to do my childhood over. I would want to do my teen years over. And I'm the one in the bunch that says absolutely not, because my teen years and my childhood years were very painful.
Mm.
And I feel very um, I don't know how I made it out of them alive, to be honest with you, because shutting myself off shut myself from love and human emotion at the age of 4. I think that kind of carried on into my childhood. Um, my mom ended up getting us back through the court system, and when she did, she had married somebody that was very violent, and my mom actually was a very violent person too at that time. Um, but she had married a non-native man who was, and I'll just say a white man because I don't want to seem disrespectful. But that's the only way that I can say it. He was a white man, and he was very violent, and they drank and they partied and did drugs. And so the welcome home, the honeymoon for us and coming home was very short lived, because that night, right after getting us back, that was my first exposure to violence, physical violence, and all that drinking. And I remember our first night back being very excited, and then all of a sudden it very quickly turned into a nightmare because we didn't understand what was happening other than the fact that they were drinking and they started fighting, and that led into years of being very afraid of coming home, and being the victim of physical violence, I suppose emotional neglect, and also my stepdad. I don't know why he married into a Native American family, but it seemed as though that he hated Native Americans because the things that he would say towards us, being Native American, really started to really affect me and my self-esteem, along with everything else. It was at that time that I started to actually be ashamed of what I looked like and what skin color I was. And we lived in small town South Dakota. And so there we were sometimes the only Native American family, indigenous family in the entire school. So the things that were happening at home were sort of being strengthened in school, being so different. But it was at that time that I really began to live in fear of being home, fear of my parents, and also the fear of people finding out what was going on. I think I started to keep the secrets and things such as that. So my childhood was something that I wanted to escape out of. I remember daydreaming that one day I was going to be old enough and when I do, I was going to be able to walk away, and I was going to be able to keep walking. And I wanted to go someplace like Alaska, and I wanted to be away from human beings. And I just wanted to enter into the forest and never look back. And so I used to daydream about things such as that. I wanted to escape, and also I started to think, almost become obsessed with death, suicide, and even at a young age, I have to say that I started to become obsessed with homicide, because it was at that time that we were being physically abused quite a bit. And I know that if I would have had access to like a gun or something, because of how bad the violence was, that I may very well have used it. And it's difficult to say that.
Oh, my heart and aroha goes out to you for your strength that has brought you through to today, and as a survivor and as somebody who was thriving, but also still carrying a lot of that residue, that fear, those moments that just hang around.
Yes.
Hang around and are a daily reminder to stay alert, be aware, keep yourself safe in different spaces. So just thank you for sharing such a deep and personal story with us tonight. Where did it go from? So teenage years, what you had a white stepfather who was a violence and abuse, and then that was repeated at school, being only Native in the school system or in the schooling experience. Then what happened? What happened then? You talked about earlier being numb from things. What was your journey? Surviving suicide, just so much. What was after that? What was how far did the down go?
That's a good question. Because I just remember living and I started to really fear. It was like my life turned upside down, because I started to fear like genuine, authentic, heartfelt experience. I mean, I wanted it though, because I would watch TV and I would daydream and I would sit in class and just sort of just think of myself in a different life. And so I really started to isolate from people and withdraw into myself. And people thought I was just a shy person, but they didn't know. And all my energy was, I think, put into just making sure to push down all this sadness and all this grief, just to push it down. And so I would be up all night, oftentimes afraid, because oftentimes that's when the violence occurred. And so it seems as though all my energy was into just sort of suppressing that. And then if anybody showed me like a degree of kindness, or if they, I always felt sort of like a stranger in a strange land. I always felt different from everybody. And I just yearned. I just yearned and wanted like some sort of deep connection with people, but yet I didn't know how to be able to do that. I didn't know how to reach out. And then it got to a point where I started to feel very non-trusting. I didn't trust people when they were trying to get to know me, when they would show kindness. To me, that scared me. And so for a long time, I remember that's the way it was. And I started to experiment around with drugs and alcohol myself. I was really afraid of just talking. I remember my voice would just, or excuse me, my mind would just be consumed with these voices. And I don't mean in regard to mental, like mental illness in, I mean more along the line with this. I'm just at a loss for words. I think it's because it's 2:30 in the morning. But I just remember always sort of telling myself to stay safe and to make sure that I never take any sort of risks. And I was a very good athlete at one time too. That was my main goal, was to play baseball. And I was always showered with attention because I could strike out so many batters. I was the best player on the team. And I remember people wanted to be my friend. The families wanted to get to know me, but I didn't know how to really like get to know people. And so people just thought I was shy, but they didn't know that I wasn't shy. I was just really afraid. And so I took that into my young adulthood and into my teens and started to experiment with drugs and alcohol. And that's when my life really began to change at that time as well.
Where did that lead to as an adult? Where did that journey, that drugs, alcohol, the whole space, where did that end for you? Or where did it get cut off or stop? Or was there a point where it did?
Oh, certainly. There was a lot of situations that we grew up stealing. It seemed like stealing was our way of having fun. Now that I look back onto it, a lot of the times we were stealing because we were hungry. We were going into stores and we were stealing food because we were hungry. And at that time, even as a youngster, I think that all the pain that I carried and the fear that I carried around with me and began to express itself through my actions. I was keeping all these secrets. And we started to we never wanted to go home. And so we kind of pretended like we were having fun. And we were, but I think we would much rather have went home and felt safe than sleeping in cardboard boxes in the back of the mall or in underneath trees and things such as that. But as far as where drugs and alcohol got me, the point is that and also during my childhood, I have a criminal record for arson. And so I really like to play with fire. And it almost seemed like I terrorized the small town of Yankton, South Dakota, because I burned so many structures down and nobody knew about it. They caught me once and I did have to go to court and everything like that. And so my point to that is if you take a person like that, which was my experience, and you pour a little bit of alcohol onto that equation with no ability to cope or to express emotions, boy, I'll tell you what, it really changed my life, but very quickly it took its grip on me as well. And so I quit school and I continued on a path of criminal lifestyle and violence. I used to tell myself I don't want to be like my parents, and I meant that. Meaning my stepdad and my mother. But I started to become exactly like them, and I didn't know that at the time, but years later, when I was able to finally get help after years of treatment centers and living with suicidal thoughts and not being able to hold down a job and going to jail. And I did go to prison when I was 24 years old. I was on probation, and of course, I was just lying to my probation officer. I couldn't stay sober. And so ultimately, that's where I ended up in was adult prison. I graduated to adult prison. And I didn't really have any sort of any identity. I felt ashamed of who I was as a Native American, as a person, as a man. And so I thought a man was somebody that swore a lot, that used violence to deal with situations, that lied, that stole. So that's what I had to go off of. I didn't really have any role models, to be honest with you. I didn't really have any role models because my grandfather was an alcoholic, my uncles were alcoholics. And so I just, for me, doing drugs and alcohol, I felt like a man. I felt like I could hang with the big boys if I could drink enough, if I could steal enough. I think I had to feel good about myself in some way, shape, or form. And since baseball was in the rearview mirror, I loved to do art and things, my hobbies were leaving me. I think I started to grasp onto anything that I could feel good, and that was drugs and alcohol, and that was sort of a hyper masculine, men don't cry type, men don't feel. We conquer women, we disrespect women, and we drink each other under the table, and we go to jail. I remember going to jail, and it was almost like a rite of passage for us in the group that I was running around with. So it was a very self-destructive lifestyle.
Yeah, right. Wow. So I'm just going to hold it there. I'm just going to put a comment just so we can have a little bit of a break. We've got a comment here from Megan. Megan says, blessings to you, Michael. Such courage sharing your story. You radiate a very strong and deep spiritual energy. I really admire you.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Megan. I admire you too. That's very encouraging. And so I offer that courage and that gift of spirit to you as well. I exchange that to you as well.
I'm going to do one more. This is from Kat Rehana. I understand what you mean when you got scared when people showed kindness through your experiences that you had throughout your life with the violence and abuse. Is so hard to accept when people are being kind. Kia kaha, which means be strong. My heart goes out to you. Thank you for sharing your kōrero, which is your journey, your life journey, your story with us.
Thank you.
Just wanted to share a couple of comments that were coming in. So when did it turn for you?
Oh,
was there a specific turning point or many points or?
Yeah, there was many points. I had a daughter. I didn't know how to love. I wanted to love. I didn't know how to love. And so at a very young age, I didn't know how to have relationships. I wanted to have a girlfriend, things like that, but just inside just did not feel, my self-esteem, I didn't feel very, I had very low self-esteem, but in that party lifestyle, the one night stands and things such as that, and then the bravado, the false bravado and the false pride of that was a part of my life and a part of our lives and the people that I hung around with. And my daughter, I became a father at a young age. And that was the first time that I started to trust love. And I remember she had these big brown eyes. And I remember I remember feeling genuine, something that I could trust, somebody that I could trust, but yet I was still using alcohol and drugs. And one of the turning points in my life with her was because she was almost like to me, like an expression of God to me. And I didn't want anything to do with God at that time. I hated religion. I didn't trust God because I always told myself, well, I heard the fire and brimstone stories, and I visualized a God that was white and had a beard, and I already thought that I was a bad person. And so when my daughter came along, that was the turning point in my life, was that I remember forcing myself, telling myself, you have to tell her that you love her. And I remember it felt wrong. I remember I had to just spit it out at first. I had to say it quickly because I didn't want my daughter to not hear the things or grow up the way that I did. And so I remember feeling really good and feeling really proud of myself when I was able to not just feel like I loved her, but to trust that and then to actually say it. And so I started off small. I would just say it really fast. And that quickly, I started to feel very comfortable with expressing of love and saying it.
And how old's your daughter now?
Oh, she's 29 now, and I have a 1.5-year-old granddaughter. So I feel very thankful that the cycle of addiction has stopped, because I was able to get help for my drugs and alcohol. Not just get help for my drugs and alcohol, but I was able to get around, accept therapy into my life and start taking a look at a lot of things of my past and my emotions, and go through therapy, go through drug and alcohol treatment, and start to learn how to live with emotions and to talk about, they say the pink elephant in the room, and start to understand the value of that could really heal, and not just heal, that it was a genuine, powerful life experience to share tears. And when I was able to open that door, it seemed like I was able to start laughing again. I was able to have joy in my life. And to this day, I'm known as somebody that's always teasing around and laughing and making fun of myself. But at the same time, I really like to believe that to be somebody that's genuine.
Thanks.
And Bonita, that turning point in my life really took hold, and I'll just explain something, a real turning point that changed the entire trajectory, I would say, of my life. And because my daughter was such a powerful force of love in my life, but it wasn't enough to get me to stop drinking and start drugging and start doing these terrible things. And taking the money and leaving and sabotaging so that I could go out and be selfish and feed my addiction. That addiction really was had its grip on me, and so I was out. And I was looking at a court date of June 15th of 1995, and my belly button birthday is on June 4th, or excuse me, February 15th of 1995 is the day that changed my life, is the day that I became sober. But February 14th is my belly button birthday. And so I had this family, this little...
Wait, just a question. What's a belly button birthday?
Oh, my birthday.
Your birthday.
Yes, it was my birthday. And so the changing point was that I knew that the gig was up. I had been in the courtrooms already. I knew that I was going to prison. I knew it. February 15th, February 14th. It's my birthday. I turned 24 years old. And you would have thought with all that love that I had at home, but February 15th, you can on my belly button birthday, since I know that I'm going to court the next day and I know that I'm going to prison. And even despite the fact that I have all this love in my life, you could just take one guess where I was on my birthday. I was in the bar rather than preparing my family that I love so much for when my daughter, her hero, the man, the hero in her life was going to be gone. And I wasn't at home, having dinner with my family. I was in a bar thinking that I was special because it was my birthday and tomorrow I'm going to prison. And so what happened was in the courtroom the next day, at that time I was very sick, and so my thinking was very sick, and so I made sure to pre-plan ahead of time that to make sure that we had my daughter up front next to me in the courtroom so that the judge could see how much we loved each other and he'd go easy on me. So I was willing to manipulate the situation and use my daughter as an ornament, or however you would want to say, for that. And what happened was she fell asleep in the courtroom. And now that I look back on it, and I was sitting there in the courtroom while the proceedings were going, and I was trying to sort of telepathically get her to wake up so the judge could just see those big brown eyes and melt her heart and go easy on me while she fell asleep. And I remember telepathically trying to get her to wake up, but she wouldn't wake up. Well, now that I look back on it, she was probably up all night. It was Daddy's birthday. She's probably up all night waiting for Daddy to get home. And that's probably why she was asleep. But what woke her up was them shackling me. And in those big courthouses here in America, you could hear a pin drop from way across the room. And that's what woke her up. I didn't get to say goodbye to her. That's what woke her up. And I never want to forget the feeling that when they were leading me away, when they shackled me away, I knew exactly when she woke up because she immediately started crying. So you could hear her through the entire building. And I remember they led me away and I could hear her crying. And they slammed this big door on me and put me into this holding cell. And it was at that time that I looked up, and because that's where I thought God was at, I looked up and I took this deep breath. And I remember saying, I will now do whatever it is that you want me to do so that I could stop. And I took this deep breath and I exhaled. And now that I look back on it, I think that I released my will and I inhaled some sort of creator into my life at that time. And so that was the turning point, February 15th of 1995.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Amazing. I've just got a few other comments about the belly button birthday thing, because other people that haven't heard that as well, like Moingaroa saying He, belly button birthday. That's cute. That is cute. We will remember you for that. We will remember you, Michael, for that. It's been a long journey since that moment, that turning point, that decision moment for you. And 25 years sober. Yeah, was it from that moment? So you went into,
yes.
got help and support, and that was the moment. And you've navigated life since then. I just want to spend the last 10 or so minutes, because I do know you're doing incredible things in your community and with your people. And I just want to touch on, where was the part with the culture of the native Indigenous man? Where did that come in? Where did culture fit into your healing journey?
Okay, that was very impactful time as well, because at that time I started to learn about myself and started to accept emotions into my life and started to live a truthful life. I started to share with other people, with other men, with other people that were healing as well. I started to share these things. The secrets were killing me, and they were just eating away at me. And so I started to share with people along the way, grief, and discover, like I keep on saying, I discovered emotions, and I started to understand that I lived my life very much in fear. And so these support groups they started to sort of coax that out of me. I started to trust them. And so that began to happen. And so my life really did begin to change, but I really went through a time when it was very difficult to face the person that I had become, and the actions, the things that I have done, to look in the mirror and to face reality. That was very much something that was part of that was very much impactful. I think if I wouldn't have been at that point where I was willing to do that, I don't think that I'd be sitting here today, to be honest with you. And so I was able to I got out of prison, and I don't know how I made it through that, because in prison there's a lot of great guys, but it's very difficult when you really do want to change. And I set to change. I've never wanted anything so badly in my life, and I've never felt something so powerful. And so I did begin that process very wholeheartedly. But and I got out of prison, and I gained the trust of my daughter back, and we just had a beautiful time. It was a process, though. At one time, I remember I was in a correctional facility where they release you out into society, but then they monitor you. You live there, and I remember this gal, a very pretty gal, and of course, I'd never been able to talk to uh, uh, people, let alone women, before. And I remember I was being introduced to her. She was a staff member there, and I remember her reaching out for my hand. And I remember looking at her hand, and I didn't feel, and I wondered why she wanted to shake my hand. And that just is so many examples that I can think of that were just, it seemed like small little learning experiences, but to me, they were very impactful. But one of those in regard to Indigenous, becoming who I was as an Indigenous man, is I met a gal out playing pool one night, and we ended up dating. And I remember I could almost paraphrase her, or I will paraphrase her, when she said, "You're not who you're supposed to be." And I remember just kind of just being shocked and offended by what she said. But to a degree, she was right. And she was a sun dancer, and we're still friends today. We're no longer a couple, but we're great friends. But she was involved in her culture. She was a sun dancer. Her brothers were singers around the drum. They were sun dancers. And so it was at that time, I was probably around 10 years sober. So that would have been maybe around 15 years ago that I started to really embrace who I was as a Native American man, as an indigenous man. And I started to really, I didn't just dip my toe into it. I just jumped right into it. And I started going to tribal university. I started to learn more about who I was as the values of a Native American person, and the responsibility and the identity of being a Native American person. It was almost like my life have come full circle because I used to be ashamed of who I was as a Native American person. And now today, boy, I tell you what, I just love the fact that a creator gifted us with that indigenous lifestyle, those indigenous ways. And I do devote myself to the people. It's almost like I think I read it somewhere, and the message is just kind of clear over and over again. Make sure your own house is in order, Michael. Make sure you're praying, make sure you're continuing to be authentic. When you make a mistake, you own up to it. You walk with respect, and you walk and you pray, and you belong to the people. And your life is about serving other people. And I know that there are people out there that are suffering, and they feel alone. And those are the people that I can help.
Yep. Absolutely. And your journey, Michael, is one that we as Native Māori, Aotearoa New Zealand, can absolutely relate to on so many levels. And the amazing journey, and then the reconnection with not just our own individual healing, but as Indigenous Native people, and what that means to us, and how that, kei a tātou anō te rongoa, that within our Native Indigenous teachings, understandings, ways of being, is the medicine that can help us and does help us. And once we link into that, after clearing, so much of the trauma, the hurt, the pain, the anguish, the surviving, just the resistance of trying to be alive and breathe, then we can truly look to the destined place that we have on the earth as Indigenous people. And so we've got some comments there just sending, we all relate, brother. Thank you so much for sharing with us. So many Māori can relate to feeling that way, Michael. It's an amazing journey reconnecting. And thank you so much. And just appreciate the comments and the thoughts too, in support of our conversation tonight with Michael, who has stepped up and stepped into sharing his journey again with us, so that we too can be enlightened, see what the similarities are as Native people. It's a very special time, and thank you for sharing your story with us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Where do you want to go now? Is there something you want to share us? We've probably got 5 minutes before we wrap up. Got a few minutes. Is there something that you want to share with us particularly, or finish up with?
Yeah, it's a kind of a tale of forgiveness. It's a true tale of forgiveness. I hated my stepdad all my life. I wanted to kill him. I honestly wanted to kill him at one time. And when I started to accept help into my life, I started to learn about forgiveness, forgiving myself. I was in a prison chapel, kind of doing a confession one time, and the person, the pastor, he told me I was forgiven, but he also said, now it's time that you forgive yourself. So I started to learn about forgiveness.
Mm.
And it's not someplace that I've just arrived at. It was a process. But when I got out, I started to see my stepdad quite a bit. And by then I was a grown man. I could protect myself. And long story short is I started to love him. The hate for him had left me because I think that I had accepted help, therapy, and friendships and love into my own life. And then I started to understand and look into the past of my parents, and I saw how they grew up.
Mm.
And I started to learn more about historical trauma and intergenerational trauma through school and things such as that. But I started to see him, and I started to like give him a big hug, and I meant it. I was really glad to see it. Well, he had cancer, and he's passed away now. But I remember I was coming home from a support meeting in a small town in South Dakota, and I had to drive to the reservation. And it was about an hour, and I got a call from my sister, and she said, well, my stepdad, his name is Dean. She said, well, he's not expected to make it through the night. And I said, and this was the courage that I received from my support group. They were able to help me see the courage that was within myself, and not just that, but to see the fear and to see the courage, so I could then not let it just rule my life the way that it had been. And so I told my sister. She said, well, he can't talk. He's unable to talk. He's literally on his deathbed. And I remember I said, oh, no, well, just put the phone up to his ear. And I was afraid at this point. But it was the courage that I had received from others that helped me. So I feel like it wasn't just me. And I remember I could hear her on the phone going, Dad, it's Mike. Mike wants to talk to you. And then she said, okay, I'm putting the phone up to his ear. And I remember saying, his name was Dean. And I remember saying, hello, Dean, this is Mike. I just want you to know, that I love you and that I forgive you for all those things that happened in the past. And I want you to know that that Lisa and my brother, that we love you and we forgive you. And we just want you to know that we're with you. And I remember saying that to him. And then even though he couldn't talk, he did say two words. He said, thanks, Mike. And he ended up dying within hours. And so to me, it kind of taught me about forgiveness, because I think that I hope that he was able to enter into spirit and kind of had the same experience as I did when I was in prison, when that pastor said, you are forgiven. I felt like all those things that I had done and all that fear that I had been lived have just released off of my shoulders. And I remember floating down, leaving that chapel, floating down the hallway, down to my cell, but I had never felt so alive and so free. And so I think about that, and I like to remember that, like, as having forgiveness in my life, that it is a gift and it can affect us, and even in the afterlife, because I like to think that having learned his history and how he was brought up, that maybe he had that same experiences as, taking his last breath, that he was able to have some forgiveness. And I thank creation, creator, all the relatives for teaching me about forgiveness by sharing your stories in your hearts, by teaching me how to do that.
Awesome. Wow, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And that's a truly a point along the healing journey, along the acceptance and healing journey, that we all get to that point. We get to choose to forgive not just ourselves but others around us, and that is another part where we are free, truly free, to then carry on and live more of a even more beautiful, at ease, calm life. It just, there's a point where you just feel like, wow, I feel like I've just started a new life. You know, it's like,
yeah,
it's stepping into a new world. So such a beautiful, powerful story, and we're going to wrap it up here. But before we do, just want to express our love and gratitude to you, Michael, for tuning in, for getting up so early in the morning, 2:30 this morning, and sharing this time with us live. I truly believe, like you just mentioned, that through the sharing of our stories, being authentic, owning those stories, putting them out for others to hear, that there's power and healing in that. So just do really want to say we appreciate your sharing tonight, and thank you so much, and look forward to maybe something else. Maybe we're going to do something else in the future. Who knows where it takes us, but I'm so glad that you connected with me, and looking forward to maybe one day sharing some prayers and sage with you in your land when the world is COVID free again. And maybe we can do that. Who knows? But just love and blessings to you and your family, and your tribal nations. Blessings to all the work that you continue to do for your families, and big loves, aroha nui from us here, myself and all those who have joined us live. And I look forward to staying in contact. Ngā mihi, aroha ki a koe mō o kōrero. I tēnei pō, nō reira, ka mihi, ka tika. Kia ora mai tātou, and thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
So we'll catch up again soon, but I just do want to wrap it up there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Pō mari e tātou, what an amazing, incredible, inspiring journey and story and life experience. So we're going to wrap that up here there. Tūturua o whiti whakamaua kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e, mauri ora.